Welcome, everyone, to the Firing the Man podcast. On today's episode, we have the pleasure of interviewing Russel Miller. Russel has 14 years of experience in e-commerce and digital marketing. He has helped brands drive over $20 million in e-commerce sales. He runs an e-commerce marketing agency, Zavient, an email agency, Risio, and is involved in a lot more. Mr. Miller has worked with brands including Texas Instruments, the UFC, Scuff Gaming, Massdrop, and many others. He is also a graduate of MIT. Be sure to stay tuned to see how you can get a free 45-minute consulting session covering how to grow your e-commerce sales in a crowded and competitive space. Welcome to the show, Russel.
Thank you so much for having me, David. Ken, really excited to be here.
Absolutely. So to get things started, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and some of the previous companies and experiences you have?
Sure. So I've had kind of a long career in digital marketing. When I where I started was really at a couple of different startups. And then I was, this was like right after B school. And then I was able to join Texas Instruments, ran digital marketing for one of their microchip divisions. I did that for about 5 years. That was really exciting because it was during the rise of Facebook and really the rise of e-commerce. I moved to California in about 2014, and then started working for an agency, and then shifted to a startup called RepairPal that was doing a lead gen in the auto repair space. I stayed with them for about 5 years before kind of leaving to do my own agency. And since then, I have two agencies. So Zavient is sort of like the digital marketing sort of umbrella, and that really focuses on ads, what I'll call sort of programmatic SEO, enterprise SEO. And then I also took over as general manager for Risio, which is an e-commerce email agency. And it's distinguished by having it's both software and an agency. And in that time, kind of running my agencies, I've had the chance to do work for a lot of different e-commerce brands, that you mentioned. It's been really interesting to help brand kind of scale up. And so now, with current work, it's really focused on, either email marketing or like paid media and SEO.
Awesome. I have to ask, because Ken and I are huge UFC fans. What did you do for the UFC?
The UFC was actually really interesting. So I was a sub for an agency that had the UFC merch account. Okay. And this is really in the weeds, but so we were in charge of shirts for, I forgot who some of the big guys are, but we were selling all their t-shirts and sweatshirts and the belts you can buy. And it was tricky because we were bidding against some of the same keywords. The big lesson that I took away from that account is you are really, I'll kind of circle back to this more later, but even if you have kind of a super well-known brand, right? Some of these fighters are super well-known, and the UFC is obviously a super well-known brand. If you have a low average order value, it makes everything else so much harder.
Can you define that number? Just curious.
Yeah. So to, be really brass tacks, we were selling $30, $35 branded t-shirts. When people were, searching for their favorite fighter. Should be a great business, except that the math just wasn't in our favor. So we were having to pay $1 or $2 a click, and it was just really, really hard to get that math to work. And so we switched to instead of kind of marketing that stuff, really focusing on kind of the higher end, which was these like really nice hoodies, and you could actually buy the championship belts, if you wanted one of your own, and that made more sense. But it was that was a key lesson there, and also we had to be very careful. We would turn off merch ads because when the fights were, they would promote the names of the fighters as the keywords and want to drive signups for the fights. So it's kind of a good lesson in kind of working with the other parts of the team, because we knew that the fights were ultimately the big money makers and the merch was just kind of a secondary thing.
Yeah, like the timing on that and competing for keywords. So, if you're selling a pay-per-view for like a George St. Pierre or a John Jones, then you want to toggle those keywords off so you're not bidding merch against the pay-per-view. Yeah, definitely huge UFC fan. So like hearing about that. Let's dive right into life cycle marketing for e-commerce now, and how it affects your ad ROAS. So as I think of like life cycle marketing for e-commerce, like you have product launch, and then you have product retires or kind of sunsets off, and so everything in between. Can you kind of speak to what what your thoughts are on that? Should you spend more upfront, taper off? What's your strategy there?
Yeah, so this was, I think, one of the big aha moments of my e-commerce career. So when I talk about lifecycle marketing, I'm really talking about the customer lifecycle rather than the product lifecycle. And
Okay.
Here's my sort of aha story. For many years, I was focused on ads and direct sales. And the model was you bring a customer in and you try to make a sale, and maybe you like retarget them. And it was a siloed approach because like I would be one part, of a larger org with like different marketing channels. And so I wouldn't necessarily see the bigger picture. What's happened to me since sort of expanding out into email marketing is I've really started to think about, as an e-commerce store owner, that you really need to think about the whole customer life cycle, and it's kind of a long-term approach to create the most value. So when you think about your channels going forward, the job of ads is to make sales, but it's also just to acquire customer information. And so ads is a costly channel, whether it's on Amazon or anything else, as you guys know. And initially, when you do an ad and you look at your tracking, you're like, oh, I have a ROAS of like, or an ACOS of like 1.1 or 1.3 or whatever. And like, that's not that great. So lifecycle marketing is basically, we're going to use channels that we own, like email and SMS and other thing, to amortize the cost of our customer acquisition, which is maybe an accounting way to look at it, but essentially, hopefully David appreciates that.
I sure do. I
I thought, yeah, David's going to relate to that one.
Speaking my language.
So, for all your listeners, think about this. When you advertise on Amazon or whatever, and you're like, man, that would just break even. Maybe at the start, right? Maybe you just got like a ROAS or an ACOS of like 1.1, 1.2, but you're going to keep marketing to that customer if you're clever, right? You're going to have a strategy to keep engaging with them over time. So what starts at like 1.1 or 1.2, over time, 2 months, 3 months becomes 1.5, 2x, 4, 5, 6 months becomes 4 to 6x. And so that's like the big idea.
Do you have any tips or tricks for the listeners on, because Amazon is a very strict marketplace and platform on, they're not going to give us the emails because then we're going to take them off of that platform. So what are some ways to engage with the Amazon customers, down the road, capture an email or get their attention in other ways?
That is an excellent question, Ken. I think one of the best tricks I've seen is to engage the customer with the actual product itself. And so let me give you a couple of examples. So I like supplements and vitamins. I order a lot of them. And the better ones that I get will have a QR code on the wrapper that'll say, for 5% off your next purchase, scan and go here and give us your email. And I consider that a really cheap, effective way of acquiring a purchase, and any sort of giveaway that you can incent in either the packaging or the actual product itself to acquire that email to keep going is just crucial. And to think about your offer, whether it's a discount on the next one, whether it's to be, put into a raffle, or whether it's to drive, user-generated content, right? To get people to be oh, if it's something more I also buy fun little sports things like ping pong battles, show us using this and we'll feature you on our social media or something like that. But you control the unboxing experience as an Amazon seller, not Amazon, which is what I would encourage you to think about.
I like that. I really like that. And warranties is one that we're given a try to on a product that seems reasonable to sign up for a warranty. And so, but I really like that. And the percentage off the user generated content. And so let's dive into email marketing. And as I mentioned before the show, we are just spinning up our email marketing department. We've been active for about 6 months. And so what are some industry standard benchmarks for email marketing? How do we know if we're doing good?
That is a super important question for all e-commerce sales. And this is actually something we've been thinking about doing. We're actually going to roll out a service of industry specific benchmarking. And I'm going to mention this on my LinkedIn later, but if you email me with your contact info in your industry, I will email you back your industry benchmarks. But what I can say generally is I'm going to distinguish between campaign emails, which are mass emails, and then workflows, which are those one-to-one emails like cart abandonment. So if you're sending campaign emails and you are good at what you do and people like your brand, we have customers that do an open rate of 10 to 20%, a click rate of about 1% or so, and then a conversion rate of 0.5%. That's pretty good. For workflows, and so for a campaign email, that's your entire list. For workflows, the numbers are much smaller of what you're sending, but the rates are much higher. So for automated workflows, you want to target an open rate of 40 to 60%, a click rate of 10 to 15%, and a conversion rate of 5%. And so it's the conversion rate is roughly 10x, even though the volume is smaller.
So Russell, on those, so it's very different between say manual campaigns versus flows.
Yeah.
And why why are the metrics so different? Is it just the response, or what do you think?
Yeah. Also a really insightful question. So it's kind of the level of your buyer intent. A campaign is sent out to your entire list, and we're sort of interrupting them with a message from your store. Whereas a flow is a response to something they did on your site, right? So a flow is a triggered email that's a response to them signing up on your site or viewing a product or taking some action. So a flow is, talking to a customer that's already engaged with you. And that's why the response rate is so much higher. And you can almost think about flows as retargeting,
Okay. Yeah, that totally makes sense. If it's your warm lead versus a cold lead.
Yes.
Yeah. And so a retargeting or an abandoned cart, they were already there. And so when they see that, they're oh, wait, yeah. Versus getting a random message in your inbox of oh, maybe I want to look at that or not. So totally makes sense.
So one follow-on question I have to that is, and when it's interesting, we have an email marketing department, and I also like subscribe to some newsletters. And when I open those, I ask myself, like, why did I open that? Was it a catchy title? Was it good content? And usually the ones that I don't unsubscribe to have great content. I enjoy reading them. They're providing a ton of value. So I just let them keep showing up. And so in terms of content, what would you recommend for someone who's just getting started? What should I send my email list?
Okay, so let's talk about that. There's kind of a cookbook of different strategies we have that are kind of sliced between whether you're B2B or B2C. I think most of your viewers are probably, DTC, direct to consumer brands. So you can email your customers a lot, but you can't sell every time. As a good rule of thumb, maybe you sell every, you can email 2-3 times a week, but you're mostly educating or being interesting, right? And so you want to talk to content about why people buy your products. So for example, my buddy, shout out to my friend Jabari Martin, who has a brand called Grit Snacks. He sells, he calls it a performance sport nugget. And it's like this little chocolate thing. And he's a bodybuilder and a trainer. And so his stuff is sometimes about grit, but mostly it's a lot of aspirational stuff about, your goals and achieving your goals and your workout and your fitness and stories and content around that. And so the people that are buying grit are, wanting to become better athletes and more, efficient and able to do more. And so a lot of the time you're talking to kind of the underlying reason, what you're, the idea of jobs to be done. So someone is buying your product to do a job, and what is that job and how can you help them to achieve that job? And so if you're thinking about broad categories, write about, how to use this thing effectively, the people that do this thing. So interviews is a great one, right? People that, use your stuff really effectively or don't even use your stuff, just in the same area. Talk to them because your customer base wants to hear from them. And then just rounding up other stuff from the web, and using current news events as jumping off points, I think is a really easy one. If you can find a way to relate it back that, makes sense.
Yeah, I like that a lot. Now, a little bit of a deeper question for, email marketing and kind of engaging our subscribers. What is your take on using templated emails versus just text-based only? Do you use both? Or do you only use one? What's your preferences there?
I think a really strong split between business to business and consumer, and then kind of products versus everything else. My agency just focuses on products. For people that are doing, B2B email where it's services or everything, go with text, right? People that are buying consulting don't really want a big splashy template or whatever. For our universe, I think templates are important, but templates shouldn't mean cookie cutter. All I mean by it is we're going to build out a graphical email which has good photography of the products. When you're thinking about your email strategy and just broader, investing in product photography is really important, because that allows you to give the designer, either it's us or someone else, something to work with, because we want to highlight your stuff and make people excited about that. We can't do that with just text, although text is an important part of it. So let me give you a slightly different example. One of our clients sells scientific equipment, things like ventilation hoods, right? So our picture of a ventilation hood will be what it is. With that audience, the guy who writes that, the copywriter who writes that, has a master's in chemistry, and he's writing about some, very detailed product specific attributes. And in that case, it makes sense to be more text heavy. But if you're selling something that is most people can just evaluate off the bat, then I think maybe more aid for the visuals.
Okay. Yeah, that's interesting. What we've noticed is whenever the templated like product-based emails, we get way more conversions. And so if we're looking to, if it's a salesy type of email, we use the templated ones. And then if we're putting out an email to get feedback on something, or we want replies, user-generated content, then we go with the text-based, because it just seems like we get more replies. It's like more of a one-to-one personal type of email with the text base. And so
I think now that is really, I think, really a good point. Like I think gathering the user-generated content is super important. So maybe a text-based appeal might be better. The thing that I would A/B test there is using pictures of other UGC that you've got to kind of draw
inside the text email.
Yeah.
Okay. I like that.
If you happen to have it, and if you don't happen to have it, if you're hacking it, go have your girlfriend or your friends just like post what's
All right. Get a quick UGC in.
Right.
I like that. Awesome. David, over to you.
Yeah, so we've spent some time talking about what are good things to put in emails. Can we spend a little bit of time on what should not be in emails? Like what gets you in the penalty box or in that spam folder? What do you want to avoid?
So this is going to be nerding out a little bit. When you're setting up your email, set up a different domain for your email domain versus your store, right? Because God forbid you should ever get into spam jail. You don't want that to affect your domain itself. So if you look at any of the major brands, if you sign up for the Gap or anything, you'll see the email address is not from like Gap directly, but from like gapemail.com or something like that. There are some things you can set up there to kind of improve your reputation. It's kind of an alphabet soup. There's 3 acronyms: SPF, DKIM, and DMARC. And I'm going to explain it at a very high level. These are all ways of proving to Google Gmail that the person sending is actually the same as the domain. So it's basically, there's a little signed certificate that says, yep, this is really for my domain, this email, so that some sort of fraudster can't pretend to send an email from your domain. Try to set that up if you can. When you are collecting emails, make sure to give, an opt-out. So the United States is an opt-out country, which means we're just required to have an unsubscribe link, whereas Europe is under GDPR, and that's opt-in. So you can email whoever you want here, make sure to give them a way to opt out, and the best way is to do it in the header. And then avoid, I'm trying to think of other ways. And then the other ways is use a warm-up service, which is what we do when we're getting someone ready, right? So if on day one, you set up this new domain and you're like, oh, cool, I'm going to email my list. Google doesn't like that. The other email providers don't like it either. So you're very gradually kind of ramping that up. And you're actually starting with a warm-up service that puts your email list with other email lists. And essentially they robot email each other and open those emails to prove to all the email EFPs that like, oh, your emails are good emails because other people are opening them before you ever email like a real person.
Yeah, I like that. That's save you from getting no replies and having a very low open rate, not due to something you did, but due to Google or so that's good. And I like how we're going deep on email. It's awesome. So the next question I have here, it says I have a stat here. It says e-commerce owners need to shoot for 20 to 40% of sales from email. What size of an email list do you think a brand needs to have to get to shoot to that? Is it size or quality, or what are your thoughts?
Yeah, so that's there's actually a bunch of stuff that goes into that, which I think is great. So we actually have a customer that has a relatively small amount of subscribers. They have about like 3,000, 4,000 subscribers, but they're achieving that. But I'll say in general, there are a couple of critical factors you want to shoot for. You want to have monthly traffic of at least 5 to 10K to your website to kind of acquire emails, or, you're doing some sort of advertising to kind of get that. And in order to kind of like build your list. But even if you have a list of like 5 to 10K, it's doable. We see, like, if you just do this yourself and you kind of don't do it that well, and you just set up like a single cart abandonment email, you'll get like 5 to 10%. With professionals who are going to put in many different workflows and kind of build those workflows out and kind of monitor it, you should be able to do 20 to 40%. And you should be able to do that with as little as like a 5,000 to 10,000 person list. It definitely helps as you get bigger. The other thing you want to, the other kind of factors that we get people to target, having a certain amount of traffic is helpful, as is having a high AOV. But when I say high, I mean at least like $50 or $100, just to make the math worth it to like set up an email program. And then in terms of like when to bring in professional help, once you cross like around like 50, 60K in revenue, then it makes sense to, maybe bring in some help to kind of scale it, because if you kind of think about the math, if you're doing 50K a month in revenue, you're probably doing 5K a month in email, and someone else can probably add an additional 5 to 10K. So it sort of more than pays for itself. And a lot of the Amazon sellers might have relatively low traffic to their site. In early days, buy low-cost traffic to get emails. So you're not trying to necessarily get sales. You're trying to find a low-cost supply of potentially interested people you can market to for a while.
Can you go into this a little bit more on how to do this?
Let's talk about kind of the world out there. So if people, there's demand fulfilling, which is Google. People are searching for your product category. That's kind of expensive. And there's demand creating, which is more like image ads. And that would be like the Facebooks and the TikToks of the world. Run a bunch of Facebook campaigns with the goal of just collecting an email address. Or buy lists. They don't tell you to do it, but like think about doing it, right? Because your whole goal here is to, like, if you're running a Facebook campaign, you show people some, interesting image, and you want to educate them about your product category. Give them like an ebook or some explanatory video or something in exchange for an email address as cheaply as possible, right? And so if you can acquire that, email address in exchange for giving, some sort of value, and then just market to that over time, right? So how cheaply can you, and there are always new channels kind of coming up, whether, influencer marketing is another one, but whatever low cost way you can of acquiring people that are interested by giving them something of value. So if it's like I'm selling ping pong battles, I'll be like, these are the 5 ways people screw up their ping pong game, as like a little ebook, or check out my video, of how people screw up their ping pong game. And in return for that, just give me your email. And I just want to do that and kind of rev up the engine until I can maybe hit, a decent sized critical mass.
So 2 follow-on questions that inner accountant in me has got to ask. What is a good price for an email? And how much is too high?
Yeah. So that is the $10,000 question. A lot of it depends on doing your math. so this is why, like, my rule of thumb is, if you're in e-commerce, you want to have a product that sells for 50 or $100, right? Because then you have enough margin, and like hopefully 50% gross margin, so at least 30%, right? So the smaller that is, the trickier it gets. In general, I'll say, like, if you can acquire, there's a general rule of an email subscriber being worth $1, right? So if you can acquire them for like 10, 20, 30 cents, it makes sense. But remember, you're going to amortize this over a period of time. So you have to have kind of the dry powder to be able to do that. So I would say, like, without knowing more about the business, I would say 10, 20, 30 cents per email. Try to keep it definitely in the lower range of that. But as you have, and sort of the other levers you can dial them, the math gets much more attractive. So one of our customers was a furniture company, and they're selling like $5,000 shares. So for them, it just doesn't matter, right? Whatever you can do. Another way to acquire emails is through giveaways or raffles, right? So you have products, and you can say, hey, enter for a chance to get one of these. We'll give one away every month, right? And so you can do that on your site. You can also do that as a Facebook campaign. You can also do that as when someone's in the unboxing, enter to receive free product. Okay, yeah, I'll give my email. So you want to try different stuff out, but in general, like, giving value of some sort and keeping that cost low, as long as someone is engaged. Like, it's not a fraudulent email or fraudulent click, but as long as, like, okay, I can reasonably expect that person is interested in the product, then I think it's worth it to pay 10, 20, 30 cents for that.
Okay. My second follow-up question, then, Ken, I'm going to kick it over to you. Where do you like to buy lists?
I have not bought lists for direct to consumer as much. We are actually onboarding, though, this is for more established companies, but like, I can maybe speak to this a bit later, but essentially, if you already have 5,000 to 10,000 visitors a month, we have technology that'll actually tell us the emails of some of those people and just capture them, so you can start sending out like emails to them. That's definitely worth testing. But if you're just, there are various list brokers out there, and I don't know all of them for direct to consumer, but if you want to hack it, the other way on Facebook is just to go around to your competitors' pages and market to people that like their pages.
That's it. I like that. All right, Ken, over to you.
For sure. No, good stuff. So to kind of bring it up a little bit at a higher level here, Russell, what are the top 3 revenue generating email campaigns that you normally recommend to run?
Yeah. So if you're sort of starting out, you're doing nothing else, you want to do a welcome email, a cart abandonment, and a product abandonment. So everyone knows about the cart abandonment, so I'll just talk about that first. But the cart abandonment, if in your marketing funnel, those are the people that are the most, as we say, like down funnel, ready to buy, right? So they put it into their cart and then left for some reason. So that is going to have the highest conversion rate, but the lowest volume, because it's at the very bottom of the funnel. So you should definitely have that set up. You should hit people up a couple of times once they're in that stage. But what a lot of people forget is the other parts of the funnel. So the welcome series goes out to everybody who subscribes, and that's where you're going to educate your customers. about the product and the brand and you and your story, and build trust over time. And then you're gonna, ask them to purchase. So in other words, they hit your site, maybe they're an ad visitor, and then we're gonna bounce, because most, paid traffic has like a 70% bounce rate. You capture that email, you have 2 or 3 more chances to talk with them. And that's like build up the story of like who you are, what you're about, why you're a good guy, and kind of like how you can help them out. And then there's product abandonment, which is maybe the least known, which is essentially saying, we're going to get you sort of at the middle of the funnel, which is you've looked at a product. So you've been to the site at least once, and now you're a little bit deeper in, but you haven't added it to the cart. So the conversion rate is lower than like a cart abandonment, but it's 5 times the volume. So it ends up being, it usually outweighs the revenue of the cart abandonment.
Very nice. How do you capture the emails of anonymous users?
Yeah, so that's really interesting. So essentially, when you, like, let's say you sign up for one of these lead gen sites, like, apply for a credit card in your wallet or something like that. They are part of these large networks that cookie you and then try to, sell you different ads. And so, we're working with a technology partner that is essentially, when you sign up for these, you're cookied and your email is hashed. It's coded with this thing called an MD5 hash. So we have a tech partner that just bought, 100 million emails and then also run them through the same hash. And so all we're doing is a lookup. So we have an anonymous visitor with an MD5 hash. We have a huge table of other MD5 hashes. And if we match, we're going to be like, oh, that's probably this guy. And if he's active on the site, then we're going to fire him an email. But it only works if your site has, because we're not going to be able to identify everybody. We want at least 5,000 to 10,000 visitors, coming through, to sort of get the volume. But essentially, it's sort of boiling the ocean. It's getting all the email addresses we can, hashing them, and then seeing if there's a match.
That's awesome. Yeah, we've been testing that out. It's working wonderfully in our company.
Nice.
All right. So Russell, can you share with the audience how to use email to drive reviews and user-generated content? This is probably one of my favorite questions here.
Oh, yeah. That is super important because it feeds into everything. I'm a fan of paying people. Like do whatever you have to do. So, the way we normally implement it is, a certain amount of time after a product purchase, we're going to hit people up for, reviews and user-generated content. And so that's actually whatever, review program or UGC program you sign up with, we wire that into the email, and then we sort of send that to them on a certain interval after their purchase. And we want to do it in such a way that we only get good feedback, because we don't want bad feedback for the store. So that's really critical. We want to tell people that, hey, if you've had a great experience, go here, leave us a review. If you have not had a great experience, get in touch with us and we'll make it right. So I want to be very clear, about that. And then in the review part, if we can offer people any incentives, either being entered in a drawing or being featured, or free product or whatever, let's do that. It's so important. And then on the flip side, if anyone leaves you a bad review, like do whatever you have to do to get them to take it down. Because it's kind of an outsized effect of the negatives to the positives. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah. And there are other sort of factors you can drive, is like the at a high level, if your product has like an emotional aspect and you can kind of create a community feeling around your brand, that's the best, right? So it's a way of belonging and being part of the tribe, you know? Um, and it's different for different types of products, right? If you sell portable generators or something like really technical, there might be around like, you know, show your professional competence or other stuff. Another great way is to interview your customers and then ask them for a review after that, because usually they're incented to give a good review. Or after you've been able to help people, like if you ever sort of go above and beyond in your store and people are really appreciative, that is a fantastic time to ask them. But gathering those reviews and piping them out to all your channels is so important.
Very nice, very nice. Why don't we turn the corner and talk about Zavient and Risio and how they can help e-commerce businesses?
Oh, that's awesome. So we spent a lot of time talking about email. So I'll start with Risio. So Risio, I took over as general manager about a year ago. And we drive about, I don't know, 20, 30 million top line for the other businesses every year. If you have like doing 50, 60K in sales and you have like 10,000 visitors a month, and you're only getting, 5 to 10% of revenue from email, we're going to analyze what you're doing, put in a bunch of other series, and then start testing stuff. And we have sort of two different plans. We have kind of a more kind of cookie cutter one, which is more low touch, and then a higher touch one for like the bigger brands. So if you're like in the maybe sub 2 million a year space, we're going to set up our system for you, which is going to get you probably to like 15, 20%. For the brands that are doing like maybe 4 or 5 million, it's that plus like continual testing and optimizing and segmenting, because they generally have larger lists. And we're going to try to get them to like 25 to 40% of sales. So that's Risio. And then for Zavient, Zavient is mostly about ads and SEO. And it uses Risio as for email. With ads, we're focused very heavily on feed optimization and figuring out how to really optimize your feed so that you can get more sales at a higher ROAS. That's on the ad side. And then on the SEO, we're thinking a lot about basically people are searching for your product or product category, and how are those product and brand pages set up so that you do well in search. And then also same thing with your feed. I think at this point in 2023, feed optimization is just like a really big part of everything. And so that's more for like, brands on the higher end are doing like 4 or 5 million a year in sales, and you're like, I want to drive more sales at a lower ROAS, and that's where we're bringing lifecycle marketing. So for Zavient, we would plug in ads, SEO, and email. We can pay a little bit more for ads, and we can amortize the cost with email. And because we're doing the whole thing, we can kind of see, down the road and be like, okay, here's how this pays off. If that makes sense.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. And I like how, kind of both of those companies like work hand in hand, and, one, takes it here and this one takes it over there. So that's really cool. So Russell, on every show we have, we run our guest through a ringer. It's called the fire round. Are you ready?
Yep. Excited.
All right. What is your favorite book?
Okay. So I think the book that I had two, and they're both kind of similar. One is called Succeed by Heidi Alverson. The other one is called Growth Mindset by Carol Dweck. Succeed is a lot more practical. It has like really practical habits for how to be more successful. Growth Mindset has really like one big idea, which is when you do badly, you need to take that as like feedback and like look closely at it in a non-personal way and see like, what can I do better? Instead of taking it personally and being like, that's a judgment on me. And I found that really helpful in like, in just growing and improving.
Cool. I like those. What are your hobbies?
For 4 or 5 years, I did improv, which is really fun. It's a lot of people are like afraid of public speaking and stuff. I learned, it really helped me to relate to people and make small talk, and really improved my listening skills, because a lot of what you're doing is when someone else talks, you're kind of repeating it back and making sure you're both on the same page. And so it really helped me as kind of an awkward guy who sits in front of a computer all day.
That's awesome. That's cool. That's the first time I've heard that answer. So that's awesome. And that's something that, I don't think I could do that. Cool. What is the one thing that you do not miss about working for the man?
Oh, that's a great one. So I spent 4 or 5 years working for Texas Instruments, which is a company of like 50,000 plus people. It has a campus that's so big that when you like enter the campus, you still have to drive like another half a mile to get to your particular building. And I was in a lot of meetings where I was like the audience. Like I wasn't the person talking, and I wasn't the person being talked to, but I was kind of like a seat filler at the Oscars. And I once calculated like how much of my like working life had been spent just sitting in those meetings. So I definitely don't miss that.
Nice. Yeah. All right. Last one. What do you think sets apart successful e-commerce entrepreneurs from those who give up, fail, or never get started?
I think a lot of people would answer this question with something inspirational about persistence and grit and stuff. And I'll say that's an important quality, and you should definitely have that quality, but I think everyone gives that answer. So I'm going to tell you the answers that I've gotten from like more like the School of Hard Knocks, like just the really brass tacks. You need a high margin. You need a high gross margin because that allows you to invest. You need a high average order value because the cost of ads, it's always going to be $1 or $2 a click. And if you're selling a $20 product, the math is not on your side. You need a good niche where you're like, okay, I can dominate this. I'm excited enough about it. Like I get the people to do it. I can work at it. And then you need good SEO, and you're like pumping out a lot of content, videos, and stuff about like that content. And you're gonna like, I have this one weird thing, and son of a bitch, if anyone searches for this on YouTube or any of the other places, they're gonna find me. So that's kind of like my formula for it.
Okay. I like it. That's really cool. Kind of an all around. Awesome. So David, do you want to close out the show? And I think Russell's got a couple of links here in the show notes.
So Russell, if people are interested in getting in touch with you, what would be the best way?
So if you are a, kind of an e-commerce business on the larger end, doing a couple million or more in sales, and you want help with your whole digital strategy, go to calendly.com/Zavient/growth_chat. You'll also just find it on the website, Zavient.com. If you want help specifically on email, go to calendly.com/Ryzeo/call, or just go to the website, Ryzeo, RYZEO.com, and the other one is Zavient, ZADIENT.com.
Awesome. And we're going to post links to all that in the show notes. Russell, want to thank you for being a guest on the Firing Man podcast, and looking forward to staying in touch.
Thank you guys so much.